Hey, what if I told you that our fish talk to us? Did you think I'd finally lost it? I think they do. Tell me what you think. No, they're not telling us words. I haven't lost my mind. But they are giving us signs, like the signs with this Buco that I missed altogether. He normally would swim in the front glass of the tank consistently. One day he stopped doing that. He developed some small white bumps. And he started to have a little bit of labored breathing. Instead of removing him immediately, quarantining him and treating him, instead I kind of decided to just watch and see what was going on. And I ended up losing a beautiful fish that I had raised all the way up from a juvie. I didn't really hear the message. I wasn't listening. Here's another example with one of my favorite fish, my Tetrastigma. The Autopharynx Tetrastigma would usually strut back and forth in the tank, usually controlling the middle of the tank, and especially during feeding time would keep the other fish corralled to either side. He was definitely the tank boss. Suddenly, though, he started to be a bit more shy and started to hang out in the back section of the tank. I started to notice some marks on his body that was indicative that maybe he was getting nipped. His fins started to show marks of being nipped. And what I was seeing was a transition that was going on in the tank, and it was going on when I wasn't looking. What was happening is he was being challenged in the top spot or the tank boss position by the polystigma. The Nimbochromis polystigma was starting to go after him and was trying to take over as the tank boss, which he eventually did. Fortunately, in this case, I was paying attention to the signs, and when the attacks on him became more severe, I quickly removed and placed the Tetrastigma in the 100-gallon, where at first, the way cichlids do, he was picked on a bit by the other fish. They do tend to gravitate toward an attack weakness, but eventually he recovered and is now the boss of the 100, and carrying on pretty much the way he used to in the 135, in a benevolent dictatorship. Another example of listening to our fish would be the situation that occurred with this peacock, this Otter Point, a beautiful fish, but I started to notice some white around the lips. I assumed that he was getting into some lip locking because he was certainly a very territorial fish and tended to control his territories. This assumption of mine led me to try to solve the problem by removing him from the 100 and putting him in the 135, where he would be with bigger fish that I assumed he'd be less likely to go after. This resulted in spreading disease. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that if we pay attention, if we listen to our fish, and by that what I mean is look for the signs that they show us, changes in behavior, changes in eating habits, changes in how they carry themselves or interact with the other fish, and of course some of the obvious things, markings on the body that indicate nips or bumps or marks, nips to the fins, damage to the lips, a foggy eye. There's lots of signs that will show you that and tell you that something is going on that needs correction. If we're listening, if we observe and quickly decide and then act, and act quickly, we can then help to provide for these fish a better quality of life and actually save ourselves some grief and expense, like the kind I went through when I moved that Otter Point to the 135, and by doing so contaminated 2 tanks with a very, very aggressive bacterial infection that ended up costing me a lot of time, a lot of effort, and certainly a lot of cost. And that is the message of this video. We just simply need to listen to our fish. They'll tell us what's going on if we're listening, and take action quickly without delay. And as a result, we will get a lot more quality and a lot more enjoyment. And I'm certainly not making a case for operating in high anxiety. High anxiety, this is supposed to be a relaxing hobby, not one that drives us crazy. But certainly be alert and aware and look for the signs. And if you do so, things will go a lot better. And this is just one man's opinion. Keep that in mind. Let's take a minute and listen to this Fusco. Let's see what he has to say. I'm seeing some markings on the side of his body, which are telling me that he's starting to get into it with some of the other fish in the tank. What he's doing is starting to challenge for the top spot. Unfortunately for him, there's a very large Venusis in this tank that isn't going to give up that spot. But I'm listening, and I'm watching him closely. Well, that's all I've got. I'm going to listen up to see what these guys right here have to say. Thanks for tuning in, my friend.